Hello everyone. Welcome to the next edition of Language Talks. We have an eminent guest today, Keerti Ramchandra. She is a multilingual, multifaceted lady who is a teacher of the English language, a translator and an editor. She delves into various genres and languages like Kannada, Marathi, English and Hindi. She received the Katha K Ramanujan Award for translation from 2 languages and the Katha Award for translation. She has done MPhil in English from JNU, New Delhi, and she also pursued a course in Canadian literature from the SNDT University, Mumbai. Join me in a conversation with her. Hello, Keerti. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Lalita. Nice to meet you.
Same here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I look forward to a wonderful conversation with you.
I look forward to answering your interesting questions.
Thank you. Keerti, I would like to start by asking you, what inspired you to pursue a career in languages?
Well, it was not what, Lalita, it was who. Actually, I wanted to be a doctor. Because when I was growing up, there were only 3 options. But medicine, engineering or commerce. And since I was hopeless at maths and I didn't want to I said medicine. Or one had to do BA and become a teacher. But my father recognized my flair for languages. And he persuaded me to give up my PUC science and join arts and do literature. I trusted his judgment fully. And I have no regrets whatsoever for having switched courses.
So sweet of him. Yes.
Yeah.
Then you have taught English language and literature at all levels. How do you differentiate your instruction to meet the diverse need of students?
Well, I think all teachers need to deal with this because they're teaching simultaneously several classes at several levels. My experience was a little different. I taught from middle school to postgraduate classes. Basically, the approach is the same. You study the mix of the student, or you assess the student profile and their needs to teach literature, importance of language. Because that's how when I taught, it was more like introducing the students to a poem or a short story by trying to connect it with their experiences of life. And not only that, I also felt that not everybody is going to be a critic or an analyst, a literary critic, for example. What I wanted really to do all along is inculcate in them a love for literature. And that because that is important. Everybody loves a good story. Everybody likes something that rhymes, rhythm, songs, and all of this, I try to show them this is all literature is about. It's not anything very esoteric or very hi-fi or anything like that. When you read a poem and like a rainbow and you see a rainbow the next day, immediately you remember the poem. So this kind of interest and love for language, because ultimately everything is expressed through language. And that's what I try to inculcate in my students. An interest in the written, whether it's a story, whether it's a essay, whether it's a play, or whether it's a novel.
Great.
And at different levels, I tried to go deeper as we went higher. And as we went into the postgraduate classes or the BA level, there what I used to do is discuss the poem or the short story or the novel with them, with the students. Let them give me their responses. And then some of them got it right, some of them didn't get it right, some of them had different insights into the text. So then I would guide them to different critics and analysts. And that's how we conducted our classes.
Oh, that is so interesting. You have been a translator in various languages you are translating to and from many languages. So how do you approach translating work from one language to another?
You know, Lalita, the approach to any text, whatever language it is in, dictates the methodology or the approach that the translator takes. Now, the most important thing is that we are translating from Indian languages, or I'm translating from Hindi, Marathi, Kannada into English, but the language structure, the system is very different. For example, in Kannada, the verb always comes at the end of the sentence. Whereas in Marathi, it is different. In English, if you put an adjective or an adverb a little away from the noun, it qualifies, the meaning changes. I only said that. I said only that. The word only has a fixed place. Whereas in Marathi, you can say, मी तेवढंच म्हटलं, मी तेवढंच बोलले, मी बोलले तेवढंच. It changes the meaning, but not drastically. So that is how I changed my approach to my translation. And as I said, whether it's a short story or whether it's a novel or whether it's a essay, they dictate the methodology that you adopt.
Can you share a specific example of a challenging translation project you have worked on?
All right. You know, I'll tell you, my first major work was Zhada Zhadpi, Vishwas Patil's novel set in rural Maharashtra. Now, I don't have any background of rural Maharashtra or even the topography of Maharashtra. So what I had to do was initially read up all about the dams and about, the construction of a dam, the geography of the region in which he had set his novel, and then try to understand what exactly it was that he was trying to do and the story he was trying to tell. It was so powerful that it didn't matter that I didn't know anything there. He had everything, all the resources in the book. Fortunately, I was able to go to my cousin's farm and I saw the characters from the novel working in the fields, in the village. I met the people who could have been anybody from that. And that really helped me to understand their language. And I got so emotionally involved in that novel. Believe me, Lalita, I used to sit with tears streaming down my eyes when I was translating parts of it. So that is one kind of a approach. It's a completely emotional approach. But when I was doing Hindutva or in Swaraj by U.R. Ananthamurthy translating from Kannada into English, I had Vivek Shanbhag with me because it's a very complex text. I did not know enough of the references that Ananthamurthi made to Kannada literature, Kannada customs, or to Buddhist tales, and because Vivek was with me, he was able to bring out all those meanings. I couldn't have read up on it and translated it. The language was not so much of a challenge. When I did Joginder Paul's Pool, that was a short story about a man and his friend who go to the Ganga to immerse the ashes of this man's father. And he has no son. Now, the conversation between the two men is essentially in Urdu and in Punjabi. And I've read the story in the Devanagari script. Now, the very title, Phool, Phool refers to the bones, the asti, as we call it.
Correct.
So, Phool Chunna is a euphemism for gathering the asti and consigning them to the sacred river.
Right.
If I had to translate it into Marathi, I would have said asti. If I had to translate it into Kannada, it could have been asti. And all the emotional content of that word asti would have come into the sentence, into the title. Now, in English, they don't have word. The word doesn't carry that emotional content. So then I forced to give a kind of, not a gloss, but in the um, text, when the word fool first comes in, I retained the word fool, and I brought out the meaning by saying collected after the cremation or something like that.
Okay.
I said the approach to translating a text varies from story to story, from author to author, from style to style. And some of the most difficult ones were the 2 or 3 that I've mentioned.
Okay.
Vijayaraja short stories were very much ahead of their times, the Marathi stories. And I had a very peculiar problem with her story, Kamal, because it explores, a woman is exploring her sexuality. And in Marathi, you can say it clothed in very metaphorical terminology. Now, in English, if I did that, it was sounding very strange. But if I used clinical terms for the different body parts and for the whole process of sexual intercourse, it would have sounded vulgar or obscene or titillating. Now, how to balance that was a really big challenge. So that's why Gadgil's sarcasm, Shania's exploring the internal mindscape of her characters, and her looking within most of all her characters. These are challenges which appear in almost all translators' experiences, and we find our own ways of dealing with them. Sometimes very successfully. Sometimes we are not happy, but we can't think of a better way to do it after much time has passed as well.
Right. As you said, the ensuring the cultural appropriateness of literary translations must be a challenge.
You know, cultural appropriateness is a very difficult concept because, as I said in my earlier statement, when you don't have that ritual, that custom, that practice, that culture in your language, then how does one transfer it? I'll give you a very interesting example. This was again from Anantamurthy, Hindutva in Swaraj, where there is a sentence where he's talking about the Medha Patkar and her colleagues who in Kannada it says Sharag Katti Nintidru. Now, in Marathi, the equivalent would be Padar Bandhun Ubhe Rahila. Now, I very easily and glibly translated it as they tucked in their sari pallus and got ready for the fight. Vivek Shanbhag asked me, Keerti, what about people who don't wear saris? In India, in Punjab, they don't wear saris, or in the Northeast, they don't wear saris. Will it make sense to them? And I thought, my goodness, this is something one takes for granted. It's a pan-Indian costume, and everybody will understand. But Padar Bandhun, Kamar Kaske, or Pallu Kaske, Khade Ho Gaye, it has a completely different connotation. It's not the physical act of tucking your sari into your waist, right?
Correct.
So that is again cultural appropriateness. How does one bring it across? My editor, she came up with it. They were in it for the long haul. And I said, no, you can't use that. Because it doesn't convey the idiomatic expression that they own. You know, so these are the kind of issues that one to keep to the cultural appropriateness without sounding alien to readers for whom the text is unfamiliar or the culture is unfamiliar.
You explained it so nicely. Thank you. You spoke about editing just now. So my next question is about editing. So as an editor, how do you ensure the clarity, coherence, or the quality of the written content?
That's a tough one. Because as an editor, these are the 3 things that one always looks for in any written text, whether it's a short story, novel, or an essay.
Okay.
I'm talking about creative non-fiction as well as fiction. But
Okay.
what happens is the basic principles of writing are coherence and clarity. Now, these two one can ensure by pointing out to the author where the gaps are, where the, when you need to fill in the blanks, where there is too much telling and not enough showing. So these can be more corrected. You can suggest to the author and they will usually they accept it, because very often what happens is when an author is writing, everything is clear in the author's head, and he or she assumes a lot that the reader knows. The reader is privy to that information and therefore leaves gaps. So once you point out that this is what you have said without giving me a reason why, but is it necessary? Of course it's necessary. You know why the character is behaving in a particular way. The reader doesn't know. So usually as an editor, I put myself in this place. Clarity are things that you can correct in a manuscript. It's like when you're learning music, singing. Tal, you can explain and you can teach a person how to maintain the tal, the count of that 8 beats or whatever it is, 16 beats. You can ensure that the voice is clear. But the quality of the writing, if you have a gruff, hoarse voice, you can't do anything about it. So the quality of writing depends entirely on how well read, how well researched a piece is, how well read the author is, how much study has gone into developing that particular theme or that idea or that character. And as an editor, find it very difficult to ensure, because it would mean rewriting it. At the same time, you have to give the writer the freedom to exercise her or his style. I can't change the writer's style as an editor, but I can help them to make it clearer, to make it reader friendly, and then serve the purpose for which a story is being told.
You have experience in translating and editing many variety of genres. So how do you adapt your style to meet these varied requirements?
Again, Lalita, the style is dictated by the author's style, because here one has to be, as a translator and an editor, one has to be very careful not to let my voice overshadow the author's voice as a translator. If the author has used a very formal register and is talking in very sort of academic kind of jargon, or if the author is writing in a very dense style, I have to adopt that style of writing, of translation. So my choice of vocabulary, my choice of sentence structure, my choice of even length of sentences. Sometimes, you have to expand, sometimes you have to contract, you have to shrink the Marathi sentences. So that depends on the author's style. If the author has gone on and on and on, then it can become tedious or tiresome. So with the permission of the author, I take a stand and I shrink it. I edit bits of it, even as a translator. Because, but of course, always with the permission and the consent of the author. If the author says, look, I want to create a sense of boredom, of ennui, and therefore I've gone on and on about the same thing, repeating myself. That is his prerogative or her prerogative. And therefore I say, fine. In English, I will try and make it sound boring, routine, mundane, if that's the way you want it, by varying my choice of words.
Yes.
So it depends. All of it depends on, ultimately, it's words, it's sentence structure, and it is all the stuff that is left unsaid, which you take into account when you are a translator. But as a translator, I would try very, very hard not to let Keerti Ramchandra be heard over. That is one. The second thing is, when translating, I find it a huge challenge not to make Gangadhar Gadgil sound like Sania or like Vijayabai or like Vishwas Patil. It's very... And Vishwas Patil, when he's talking about Zada Zarti or when he's talking about Netaji Bose, the two registers are completely different.
Yes, yes.
He has a lot of respect and regard for Netaji, and that comes through.
Yes.
So these are the ways I try to deal with the different kinds of writing that I take on.
Wow, wow, thanks. Can you tell us about the recent trends in the translation and editing industry?
I find that there's been a huge interest in translated texts, which is wonderful. Because in 1991, I think Keerti Ramchandra was the first individual who started Katha. And they used to publish short stories, the most recent current short stories, in translation. And Katha Prize Stories was a huge success. But in the last 20 years or so, the interest in translation has grown so much. And there have been awards and there has been recognition for translators. You know, until very recently, the translators' names were not even on the cover of the book. Somewhere in the middle of the copyright page or on the half title page, they're translated by in a very small font. But now it's not like that. And it's a wonderful thing because, you know, I look at it as a very useful tool for integration. When you don't think of people as the other, when you don't think they're unfamiliar, they're strange, they're different, the ability to accept becomes that much greater. So when you read about Korea, when you read in China, when you read from European countries, we've never questioned the translations from European languages. But now we've been exposed to all kinds of other languages. And that is something wonderful. More than anything else, the interest in translation in Indian languages into English has become so popular that and so successful that I hope our worldview will also become broader and we will become more accepting of each other. When we understand that, you know, under the color of our skin and the accent of our words and the taste of our sambar, all of us cry when we are hurt, all of us worry when our children grow up and we have issues when we are dealing with, you know, modern youngsters, disobedience, rebelliousness. All mothers and fathers go through the same thing, whether you're from Kerala or from Punjab. And I think once you realize that, it's easier to accept each other. Don't you think so?
Yes, totally agree. Keerti, what are some of the key skills and techniques you think a translator or an editor must possess?
The first thing is sensitivity. You have to be to a text, to the characters, to the situations they're thrown into. Only then, when you understand the pain, the pathos, the joy, the exaltation of the characters, then can you reproduce it in another language. You can't do it unless you're sensitive. That's one. Primarily, you have to be a good reader. And even to be an editor, I like to say that I like to hear the author, the book, the text. I like to hear it because then I know how it sounds. I know the rhythm. I know the cadences. I know the pattern of the words. And that makes it easier for me to choose my own way of translation and editing, both. Second, one must have a complete command over the language, the target language into which one is translating. All possibilities that language is capable of. marod ke, tod ke, mod ke, you have to be able to use the language to suit your needs, because we're talking about languages of two completely different families. The Indian languages, as well as English, which is now an Indian language, but which we still feel is a little away from us. As an editor, you need to be sensitive to the grammar, the elements of style that have been that you talked about earlier, coherence, clarity, and integrity of purpose. Why am I writing this? Why am I telling this story? Am I being true to the way the characters behave, or am I doing it for effect? Am I doing it to impress? What am I doing it for? I think integrity is there in a writer, in a translator. I don't want to make a story better. If the author wanted to make it better, he would have done it. He is more competent than I am. I am only reproducing what he has said to the best of my ability. There is this debate going on all the time about Marquez having said that the translation, Rabassa's translation of 100 Years of Solitude, was better than the original. I feel my duty is to make it as close to the original, the experience of the story or the novel, as close to the original and as fluent. Now, when you read a Marathi text and it's written well, it flows. But if my English translation stumbles and staggers and it's boring, it's plodding, then what am I doing a disservice to the writer? The person who's reading the translation will think the writer's capability is not as it should be.
Right.
I'm doing a disservice to the original. So as an editor and as a translator, a command over the language, a very close familiarity and with the source language, and the ability to ask questions. If the author is alive, wonderful, interact with the author. If the author is not alive, interact with people who can help you understand that particular culture, that particular background, that particular time frame, the period in which it was set. So, and read. That is the bottom line. The more you read, the more fluent you become in your expression. And the more fluent you are in your expression, verbal, oral expression, the more fluent you become in your written word.
Right. What aspects of your work as a multilingual language professionals do you find most rewarding?
Lalita, I can't tell you how wonderful the experience of translation is, because there is such a variety of books and works that I've translated. I've done Zhada Dharti, I've done Mahanayak, I've done Hindutva of Hind Swaraj. I've worked on a autobiography of Madhu Limaye, which is political, completely. And I didn't know very much about all of the socialist movement and his own contribution. Then all the fiction that I've translated. Each book is different. Each book has enriched me to the extent I cannot tell you. And now I've just taken on a project to translate Vandana Bokil's biography of Rohini Bhate, the Kathak dancer. And I'm so excited because, because Kathak dance is something I am familiar with. I know another Kathak dancer whose book I have helped to edit. And now I'm getting an opportunity to translate a biography of a lady I've admired and whose Guruji was my doctor's husband, Dr. Mohan Kalyanpurkar. So it's just been an amazing experience. I mean, I've translated about so much variety. It's enriched me 100-fold. In one lifetime, I couldn't have studied all these subjects. I've edited books on cricket. I've edited books on cookery. I've edited books on all kinds of subjects. And each one feeds into, into your experience of life.
Right. Wow. This must be so enriching.
It's a passion, and teaching was my first passion. This comes a close second.
You have conducted many workshops about translation and creative writing. How was that experience?
Well, again, it was more like a teaching experience, which for me was very close to my heart. But the thing in a workshop is that you set assignments. You can't tell them that it's very difficult to be a translator. It's discouraging. So the first thing I would tell them is, look, if you want to be a translator, these are your job opportunities, because nobody is doing anything for the love of it when they're 20 or 21. They're looking at it as employable skill.
Correct.
So I tell them, if you want to be a translator, these are your options. There are different kinds of translation. There's technical translation, there is script translation, there is a fiction translation, literary translation. You can choose whatever interests you. But for all of them, the basic skills that it's hard work. There are times when you've spent all night trying to get the right word. They won't understand. They did not understand it at that stage. So what I would do is set them an example. Tell them, you write down 4 sentences in your language, whatever, whether it's Malayalam, Telugu, Urdu, Bengali, languages that I don't know. And I say, okay, now you translate this for me and tell me what it means. In Marathi, I would say, Ai Ragavli, Manu Rusun Vasli. Okay. But now, Ai Ragavli, that's mother, was angry. There's no but she, T Rusun Basli is not there. Ai Ragavli, Manu Rusun Basli. There's no subject in that second half of the sentence. Now, how can you do that in English without saying she? Otherwise, mother was angry, she sulked. It means the mother sulked, na? It would mean that the mother was sulking.
Correct.
Right. So then how do you deal with this? Simple word like I. How do you translate it? I would ask them. Mother. I said, mother. Is that the same feeling as I? What do you call your mother? Amma. Okay. Does Amma mean the same thing as mother? No, ma'am. Then what? So you have to think. Now, do I keep the word I? Okay, fine. That's allowed. I'm an English-speaking person. I say, call my mother mummy. So can I put mummy? Is mummy the same as I? Mummy is an alien word.
Yes.
In a sense. Now, how can you say mummy Ragavli? It's not the same thing as got angry or scolded. Isn't it? It's different. Mummy scolded her, so she sulked. Now, I'm adding words to make the meaning clear. Why? Because the language is different. The structure of the language is different. The what do you call it? The dharma of each language is different. So in English, you need to have your pronouns in the right place. You need to have a subject, verb, object. And then what do I do with Rusun Basli? Kute Basli, Kannada Basli, ki Kute Basli. You don't need to say that. But in English, she sulked. Now, sulked is what? It's a sort of a comprehensive word.
Right.
You can't say that she sulked. Rusun Basli is, it conveys a very different sense. So when I give them this kind of one single sentence and ask them to translate and then point out all the gaps or in the translation, they say, oh my God, ma'am, we didn't realize it was so difficult. But they get there eventually because they really want to do it. And students are the same everywhere. They want instant results. So they don't want to read, they don't want to make too much of an effort. And I always say that, you need to have an acquaintance with your source language.
Right.
You need to understand the source language and all the rituals, the customs, the habits, the food, the temperament. And then you need to have a strong command of your target language. And I'm only talking about English because I don't translate from one language into another, the inter-Indian language translation.
Okay.
So that's why I always bring English as an example. So these, I said, you must have full control over that language. It should be in your grasp. And you should be able, only when you know something powerful, when you know something very well, you can distort it slightly, you can modify it, you can twist it, you can tweak it. But if you don't, then you're doing the wrong things, because grammatically you might be failing in the meaning, the semantics of it. So you have to be very careful, and you have to read. And one example I have to mention, if we have the time, very small story, to explain to them the power of words, the power of language, the power of, I came across one beautiful video clip when I was teaching communication skills. There was a man sitting on the pavement with a placard next to him, which said, "I am blind, help me."
Okay.
And people would just walk past, another homeless person, another person asking for help. A young girl walks past, comes back, and she changes it. She writes on the back of it, "It's a beautiful day, but I cannot see it." And immediately people stop, they look at it, and they offer him some help. When you play the victim, nobody is going to feel sorry for you. But when somebody says, "It's a beautiful day, but I cannot see it," you feel, oh, how sad. And then you immediately, it's not pity, it's empathy, it's sympathy. And then you want to help. So this is how I used to explain to them the power of language, the power of words, and what you can do if you know language well. Like, a funny example. If you say, "Mala bhook lagli," nobody is going to pay any attention. "I could eat a horse. I'm ravenous." These are the words which create the urgency of your hunger. And so these are the kind of examples that I give to make them understand why it is important to have language, a command over the language.
Command, yes. Yes, this you shared it in a very interesting way.
It's lovely, actually. Having a workshop is a wonderful experience, and at the end of it, when you realize that they have managed to get it right, at least they've made a really good effort, it's very satisfying for them and more for me.
Yes. Keerti, can you share any memorable experience that had a significant impact on your worldview?
I'd like to mention 3 important things which framed me as a human being, as a person. The first is, Lalita, I grew up in the early 50s. Okay. And when I come from a bilingual family. My mother is a Maharashtrian, my father is a Kannadiga. Both the languages were spoken equally in our house, and we had help, which was all Muslim, and they all spoke that Dakhani, Hindi or whatever mix, that dialect. I went to a convent school for my entire schooling. I would come home with the same devotion and fervor. I would recite the Ram Raksha or the Shubham Karoti as I would when I went to the school chapel and said, "Our Father who art in heaven," or "Hail Mary, full of grace." And nobody ever stopped me. There was never any restriction on why. Why are you doing this? Or no, you shouldn't. So that was one thing. As a student, my teachers were so inspiring. In the sense, everyone from my school teachers to my postgraduate level, and then my JNU experience at MPhil, they had the ability to bring the best out of me. They would provoke me, they would encourage me, as a result of which, and they inspired me to take up that subject and I got so immersed in it that I loved my language and my literature. And therefore, I became, and I said, my role models are my teachers. Whatever they taught me when I was in class 5 or 7 or at MPhil level, I remember to this day. I wanted to be a teacher like that.
Okay.
What I taught should be remembered. Whether they remember me or not, it doesn't matter. But I can draw the map of India freehand today because my teacher in class 9 taught me how to do it or showed me how to do it. That was one. The MPhil, Lalita.
Okay.
All my ideas of English language and grammar and were turned on their head, and literary criticism and appreciation, because 10, 11 years had elapsed from the time I finished my MA and I did my MPhil.
Okay.
And then I realized that there's a whole lot more to language. It was all about communication, and successful communication is what is the objective. Not writing a beautiful simile or describing a beautiful sunset. It was that, but it was also an experience of the sunset. And when I taught at St. Mary's in Dubai, I had some outstanding English colleagues, British colleagues. And they approached English language teaching in a completely different way. And from then on, I have changed my views about prescriptive grammar. Of course, you need a solid foundation in grammar, but there is no one standard language. There are so many Englishes, there are so many varieties. The way we speak, when we are constantly living in two linguistic worlds. All of us are bilingual by nature, and we're constantly code switching. How many times have I used Marathi when I'm talking to you? Isn't it? All of us are doing that all the time. So we need, and my hope and prayer for all translators and translations is that, and readers of course, that we can evolve language and English, because that's the language I translate most into. We can evolve a language that is true to the source, true to my readers, and acceptable across the board, everywhere, whether it's in India or whether it's in any English-speaking country. We need to have that kind of a comprehensive understanding of language.
Okay. Wow.
Have I made sense?
So well formulated. Yes. That was a lovely conversation, Keerti. Thank you so much for joining. I wish you the best for your projects and hope to meet you soon. Thank you. Have a good day.